Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. Thank you for all joining us. I'm sure we'll have a few more people pop in over the next few minutes, but I'm going to introduce the session so long and introduce our speaker. We have Louise Ferreira here, and we are very privileged and honored to have you with us. Louise, thank you for giving up some of your time. Today's session that she's put together for us is all about making sense of sugar, and it's World Diabetes Month. I've done my part to try and be in my baby blue and my blue background. The color theme for diabetes is the blue circle, so that's the blue. So hence today's topic. And Friday itself is World Diabetes Day, which is honoring and celebrating Sir Frederick Banting, who, a little bit of a factoid to get us started here, discovered insulin in 1921 and first treated diabetes in 1922. So we've been at this for over 100 years, and apart from saving a few lives or many lives thanks to the finding of insulin, diabetes is a lifestyle disease perhaps we haven't made much progress on. And I know Louise is going to dig into this a little bit, but the significant impact that diabetes has as a lifestyle disease and contributes a significant amount to sort of the cost to mortality as far as non-communicable diseases go. And it's something that we really need to be doing a lot more for. And we know how important lifestyle is for that. And Louise is well placed to dig into that. She herself is a dietitian and has been at the coalface of this for a number of years, for over 14 years, I think now, Louise. Some of that's abroad, and she is back home now. And you might have seen Louise before. If she looks a little bit familiar to you, that's because she's a bit of a unicorn. She's not only a registered dietitian, but you've also seen her in front of the camera for some of our workout content. Some of our latest workouts is her on the exercise mat. So not only the nutrition side, but the exercise bits as well. She's very well placed to inform us on the things we should perhaps be doing or considering to help control our blood sugar levels, to pick things out, what we can do, what we can manage, because a lot of these things are manageable if we're doing the right things. And hopefully you're going to see a little bit more of Louise over the next little while. There'll be some more workouts coming, but also our Sugar Sense preventive pathway will be launching imminently, which is our coaching solution. And the theme for World Diabetes Month is access to diabetes care, and that access means things like this. It might be some webinars for education. We're playing our part there. It might be knowledge sharing, but also the support that we're able to offer in the digital world at Strove via things like our coaching pathways to help manage blood glucose levels a little bit better. So, Louise, with all of your experience and knowledge and being so good in front of the camera, we're really looking forward to that session. Guys, feel free to pop some questions into the chat. We'll swing around to them at the end, if there are things that come to mind. Hopefully we can have a nice engaging session and answer your questions if there are things that stimulate those ideas as we go through. All right, Louise, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm really happy to be here sharing this topic. That's really just such a passion of mine. I think I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with diabetes. It's such a complex condition, and there's so much we can learn about it, so much we can do about it. But obviously it affects so many South Africans. So it's not the greatest of things, but the more we learn, the more we can be equipped, the better. So I've got a little timer here in front of me so that I don't waffle on. And I really enjoy interacting. The last thing I want to do is just be here boring you. So you are so welcome to pop a little question in the chat, pop a comment, and hopefully we'll have some eyes on that as we go. So as Adrian mentioned, I'm Louise. I am a dietitian, and I've done a lot of work in diabetes, most recent over Cambridge University Hospital, working with pediatric diabetes in the center there. And pediatric diabetes mostly is type 1. So I think you learn a lot about all of this. But today The focus on this session will be mainly type 2, just because it's a little bit more relevant. So making sense of sugar. Let's go. 7.2%, that's sort of the latest statistic that came from the International Diabetes Federation of the number of people in South Africa who have been diagnosed with diabetes. Now that probably incorporates type 1 and type 2, but the majority of that will be type 2. And I think that is an astounding amount. And there are a whole lot more who have not yet been diagnosed, because we know that this is a progressive condition. And so there is insulin resistance and the beginning of these metabolic changes before we actually get to the level of diagnosis. And even if we're at the level of diagnosis, there might be some time before symptoms show and the person actually goes to the clinic or goes to the doctor to get tested to be diagnosed. So this is a very, very, very big number, and so a very relevant topic and really worthy of our attention, our time, and our learning. And I'm sure most of you, if you're interested in this, have first-hand experience of this condition, or perhaps someone in your family that you care about, and you just want to equip yourself to know more and to do more. And so actually my main motivation for this session is more than just an education. We can all go into the Googles. I do want to chat a little bit about this condition, but mostly I want to do some equipping. I want to actually get you activated. And so we see at the bottom there's the how can you help section after I've gone through a little bit of what diabetes is, how it works, and how our blood glucose regulation gets disrupted by diabetes. We're going to look a little bit at diet, exercise, and stress management. And here I want to get practical and see what we can actually do about this, because there's information and then there's action, and sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between those things, and there's absolutely no point in learning and understanding, even being equipped, if we're not going to do something about it. So be prepared today. If you have a paper and pen with you, or you all probably have some device near you, your computer or your phone, I'd like at least one goal that's going to come from diet, that's going to come from exercise, and that's going to come from stress management by the end of the session. I'll prompt you a little bit later for that. Okay, cool. So let's get going. This is a little bit of a blurry image, apologies, but homeostasis, if you can see written on the side there, is the body's goal and drive and motivation and almost absolute obsession with keeping the body stable, keeping things at equilibrium, whether that's hormones or blood glucose or anything else going on. So on this diagram, let's have a little bit of a quick look. This is the pathophysiology of the pathophysiology of diabetes. But first, we're going to look at how blood sugar is actually controlled, how it's maintained within the normal range in the body. So we've got two organs there. On the left, you can see we've got the liver, and on the right, we've got the pancreas. And these two guys are involved in our blood glucose regulation. And we're going to look at that red arrow. So from the top where it says high blood sugar, that red arrow is coming down. And let's just follow that pathway. So blood glucose goes up, high blood sugar. This happens for a number of reasons. There are many different things that can spike our blood glucose. The most common and most obvious is food. It's natural, it's good, we need to do it. Eat an apple, up goes the blood sugar, because the stomach has digested those carbohydrates. It's broken it down into the smaller parts, glucose. The bloodstream has absorbed it, and now that sugar, that glucose is in the blood. Okay, and so our pancreas, he spends his whole life watching the blood, and he's looking. It's gone up. This person must have eaten something. Okay, cool. I can navigate this. I can help. He makes insulin. And insulin comes and sort of unlocks. They always talk about the lock and key sort of diagram. It unlocks the body's cells, your nose, your eyeballs, your lungs, the things in your body that need this glucose to function. The pancreas makes insulin that unlocks those cells. The glucose goes into the cells to get to work, and then the glucose in the blood drops. So blood glucose is lowered, as we can see in that little red block down there, and things are normalized. Homeostasis has occurred. And the other thing that the pancreas does when it secretes insulin is that insulin goes to the liver, and it tells the liver to store some glucose as glycogen. So glucose packed together makes glycogen, and it's a nice little store for a rainy day, perhaps when there's no food available, or you've got a little extra bout of exercise, or you're a bit stressed, your liver can actually shoot out some extra glucose so that we can use it for energy, because we need to run away from a lion or do 50 squats because the exercise instructor has done something or told us to do something. Okay, so that's normally how we navigate blood glucose. You might see there's also a blue arrow system, and that's just another hormone, glucagon, which is a counter-regulatory, big word, counter-regulatory hormone. It works against, sort of together with, but against insulin to maintain that blood glucose, because it can also go too low. So glucagon is secreted by the pancreas when the blood sugar is low, to then release the glucose from the liver from the glycogen stores. Okay, so it's a beautiful, incredible system that has been created in our bodies so that we can maintain homeostasis in the blood in terms of blood glucose. It's phenomenal. So why is it so important to have good blood glucose levels? Well, not really good, that's a silly word to use, but to have a range of appropriate blood glucose levels. Why is it important? Why should we not go too high? Why should we not go too low? And the reason this matters is that there are problems that can occur in the body when the blood glucose goes out of range. So we've got short-term consequences and we've got long-term consequences. And I've highlighted 2 words there to say that these are the sort of main problem areas. So in the short term, if the blood glucose goes high, we might feel symptoms like being thirsty, being a little bit fatigued, a little bit sort of confused. You go to the toilet a lot. In the short term, that's a little bit uncomfortable, but there's not major long-term damage happening. If we remain high for a long period of time, the danger there actually is that we might become accustomed to that high level and not really feel those symptoms anymore. And that is a problem. The reason I've highlighted that in yellow is that over the long term, high blood glucose does cause damage to little tiny blood vessels. We've got them in the eyes and the kidneys, and to the nervous system. So mostly on your periphery, so your fingertips, your toes, other areas that are in the extremities of the body. And we kind of can lose function, lose feeling. And that's where you'll see the chronic conditions that come with long-term living with diabetes that is not controlled, and people have difficulty seeing. They might have to go on dialysis because the kidneys aren't working so well. Wound healing is not happening. We see amputations, those kind of things that actually come a lot quicker than we realize. So it's really important to keep the blood sugar down, so not too high. And although we might not feel it on a day-to-day basis or feel too worried on a day-to-day basis, every day that your blood sugar is a little bit too high, you're building into that long-term damage. So it is quite important. It's quite difficult for us to stay motivated, to keep it down when we don't feel the immediate results. I'm very similar, but we just kind of need to keep that in mind. And then if the blood glucose drops too low, so in the short term, that's when it's most dangerous. If we go, they say 4 is the floor, go below 4, mostly if someone has type 1 diabetes because there's insulin involved, or if someone has type 2 diabetes and has progressed to be using a sulfonylurea that stimulates the pancreas to secrete insulin, or is actually using insulin already, which is not a bad thing, it's helpful, but that creates a risk for dropping too low. And in the short term, that's quite dangerous. And we call that a hypoglycemia, where you might feel a little bit shaky, a little bit agitated, a little bit anxious, a little bit confused, sweaty. It's sort of like an adrenaline response as the body's freaking out and trying to get that blood glucose back up again. And that is dangerous because if it continues to drop, for example, if that insulin is still active in your system and you're not taking any carbohydrate, these people can black out, go into a coma, and that is quite fatal actually over time. So it's dangerous in the short term to drop too low if there is insulin active in the body. Over the long term, if there are frequent lows, you can sometimes lose your sensitivity to the stimulus of it being low. So you might not even realize that you're going low. And that's obviously a little bit dangerous. And also there's a little bit of impact on the brain function if you're continuously putting that brain under that stress. Okay, so it's important to keep the blood sugar within range, okay? People living with type 1 diabetes or people using insulin might hit those extremes. and that's a little bit more serious. People living with type 2 and maybe not taking meds or taking metformin, you've got a lower risk of sort of dipping too low, but you certainly are at risk of keeping the long-term high. Okay, cool. So let's look at our same picture again, or what is actually happening when someone is diagnosed with diabetes. We'll look at type 2 diabetes, because with type 1, our pancreas just stops making insulin after a little honeymoon period. But with type 2, this is progressive. So when we have resistance to insulin, that's sort of the beginning. You might have heard the term pre-diabetes, and then move on to the actual diagnosis of diabetes. This is what happens. I've drawn a little wobbly circle around the tissue cells. So the blood sugar goes up because we've eaten, we're stressing, life is happening. The pancreas is told to make insulin. He makes insulin, and then there's a little bit of a block. Okay, the insulin doesn't really work because there is a resistance to the insulin. So the cells are just like, not receiving that insulin as well. So what ends up happening is the blood glucose stays high, and the pancreas is like, maybe this person just ate another apple. Let me make more insulin. And so it takes a whole lot more insulin to get that blood glucose back to normal, because our body is obsessed with homeostasis. It wants to stay safe. We want to keep that blood glucose normal. So even before the diagnosis of diabetes, even before we notice that the blood sugar is staying high, there's going to be hyperinsulinemia, high levels of insulin, because there's so much insulin needed to get that glucose into the cells, because it's just resisting us and resisting us and resisting us. And now, what do you think happens to a pancreas that is working and working and working and pumping out insulin and not really seeing the results? He is sitting there typing away, sending his emails. He's overworked, he's underpaid, he is getting exhausted. And so that's when we start to see the deterioration of the pancreas's ability to compensate for this insulin resistance, to make enough insulin. He's just like, hey, actually I can't. He goes on a go slow. Things get a little bit difficult in the office. And this is where we see the progression of type 2 diabetes. Okay. So because it's the pancreas's job to watch the blood glucose and then to respond accordingly, if he's not really able to do his job properly, we need to step in and help. Okay, so helping means we need to see what is happening in the blood. We need to know if that blood glucose is high, if it's low, so that we can know how to help the pancreas and how much to help the pancreas. Okay, we help the pancreas with lifestyle things we'll chat about now, your diet, exercise, all those things. We also help the pancreas with medication. And obviously it's important to get the right amount of medication. Do we want more? Do we want less? And things like that. So the two ways that we can check the blood glucose is, firstly, there's a finger prick, and then there's a CGM. So there are pros and cons to both of these. A CGM means a continuous glucose monitor, and you'll see the picture top right is a little transmitter sitting there. There is a sensor just underneath the skin touching the interstitial fluid, and it is aware of what the blood glucose is doing, but it doesn't actually measure the glucose in the blood. It is measuring the glucose in the interstitial fluid. Okay, so that is an important thing to note. Whereas when we prick our finger, that goes into the blood. So then we know exactly in real time, this is the measurement of the glucose in my blood. It's annoying, it's sore, we only get one reading, you don't get a whole pattern. So those are the drawbacks, but the good thing is it is far more accurate. And I suppose accurate perhaps isn't the exact word, but it's accurate in terms of in time, in real time, we know what it is. Because with the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor, it's not exactly in real time. There is a little bit of a delay, and that's why I have this weird little picture of the truck. I don't know if it's a Hilux or a Ranger, don't know which team you're on, but if we see there's a bucky pulling a trailer. Okay, so if the blood glucose, there's our bucky, and the trailer is our interstitial fluid glucose. If the blood glucose is relatively stable, they'll be the same. But as soon as there's a hill, if that bucky goes up a hill or the bucky goes down a hill, there'll be a difference. So when the blood glucose is rising quickly or when it's dropping quickly, And that happens when we eat, when we exercise. Those are mainly the big players. There will be a difference between that CGM and the finger prick. So it's just something to note, and it's usually like 10 to 15 minutes of difference, okay? And if it's not so important to know the blood glucose in real time, if you rather want to look at that trend of data and see what's happening over time, then the CGM is definitely for you. I think unfortunately in South Africa, medical aids don't cover this, and so we have to pay, and they do become quite expensive. But they're an incredible piece of equipment. So let's have a look at what we are actually looking for. So we're going to look at the finger prick quickly, and then the CGM. When do we want to test, and why? What's the point? So there's no point in just testing. We need to do something with that data. Okay, so we want to check fasting. Fasting means you haven't eaten for a period of time, and that would usually be your morning value. And why do we check in the morning? Because we want to see what happened overnight. If you wake up like 3 consecutive days high in the morning, you might think, I need to change my medication, or I need to shift my late night snack, or think of sort of what you are doing. And something does need to change, because when you wake up in the morning, a fasting blood glucose should be within range. When you do a finger prick, we also would like to test pre and post meals, and we usually give about a 2-hour gap. We test before to see what the blood glucose was before we ate, and then we test afterwards to see, is my insulin actually working to bring me back down into range after I eat? If it's not, do I need to change my medication? Do I need to go for a walk? Do I need to take my insulin 15 minutes earlier? What do I need to do? There's things that we can do about that. So that's to check how the body is doing with a meal. Okay, we always want to check when we are symptomatic. Symptomatic, like when I said, when the blood glucose is too high or too low, you might feel funny things in your body because there is a response. You might want to just check to make sure. Sometimes it's confusing. You don't know if you're too high or too low, if you feel a bit shaky. So check, because the last thing you want to do is eat something if you're too high, or go take a little bit of insulin or go for a walk or something if you are too low. So it is important to know what it is. And then the other important time is before and after exercise, because exercise does, and in a very potent way, affect the blood glucose. So we do want to know what is happening in the blood before we put ourselves through any form of exercise. Okay, so that's what we do when we do the finger prick. I'm going to move along because I'm excited to get to the practical part. This is also amazing. I don't know if any of you have seen this before. You might have, if you have used a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. This is what gets uploaded. You'll have a profile online, and you'll be able to see. So this is called an ambulatory glucose profile, an AGP report. And this is what comes out. You can choose the time period. So this, we can see at the top there, 13-day time period. And you kind of see what the blood glucose has been doing over that time. And for those of you who work in statistics or any job that actually uses some sort of stats, you probably froth to see this. It's really amazing. It gives you so much information and so much that you can figure out. So the main difference here with the finger prick is that you get a continuous reading. So we look at the top right, and you've got those colorful things. We've got the green bar, which is how much time in these last 2 weeks did you spend within your target range. When we go above that, we have high and very high. How much time as a percentage did you spend with your blood glucose high or very high? And then that red and orange is low and very low. So we don't ever want to be very low. Something needs to change. Okay, that's dangerous. And a 4% low is pretty normal. That's okay. And just the same way, for people living with type 2 or type 1 diabetes, actually, where we have a target HbA1c, that average blood glucose over 3 months. If someone's a little bit older and it's difficult to maintain tight blood glucose, or there's a high risk of a hypo, we might allow it to go a little bit higher. There's like different parameters and different levels that we can set it at. So it's the same for this when we have a continuous glucose monitor. If you have a toddler or a teenager, it's quite normal for them to have like 50% time in range, and we want to be happy with that. Whereas if someone is sort of in their 20s and their 30s, really on it, an athlete wanting to do well, you might want a bit of like more of a 70-75% time in range. So you can look at that and play with that. Underneath that, what you'll see is an average of where the blood glucose is over the time. And below that, you see the graph of each day. And it's quite difficult to look at each day and make a pattern. So that's why they put it all together so that you can see what's going on. And it's the mean that you see, that black line. And then most of the time, the darker blue and then the lighter blue. with this graph, we see quite a big variability. There's highs and lows, which means things are quite unstable. It's not good to have variability. It means we're reacting and we're not sort of preempting. And having a more predictable blood glucose profile would mean we're a little bit closer and it's a little bit more stable. But what this does actually show is we can look at something. Okay, there's very clearly a spike just after 8:30, actually just after 8 a.m. And that's probably breakfast. So what's happening at breakfast time? You might talk to this person. Are you taking your insulin at breakfast, or are you not on insulin and you're just a little bit resistant? We need to change your medication, or do we need to exercise at breakfast time to make you more sensitive to insulin? Something needs to happen there because there's a pattern of going up all the time. If we saw that it was going into the low before that spike, we might think, are you over treating a hypo? Are you having too many carbs? There's so much information that we can get from looking at the graphs from a continuous glucose monitor. And if you've never worn one of these, I'd really encourage you to do it, because I actually encourage most of my patients, if they can afford to, I think you'll be paying $1,000, $1,500 for, you can get a Libre 2 on Takealot, and you pop that sensor on, you get the app to go with it, and you can experiment with those 2 weeks. So it'll last 14 days, the Libre, and you can just see what happens. Go for a run, go for a gym session, eat a chocolate, eat well, figure out, and then have a look at what happens to your blood glucose. And I tell you, that is the greatest motivator for any sort of change. If I think I was wearing one just when I was working at the hospital, just so that I could experience it. And I don't have diabetes, but my sugar spiked after I ate. I mean, I don't want to tell you, but I ate a whole slab, and it just went for it. And I got quite a shock. And I tell you, that motivates me to really not do that again. I'm try and have at least just half of it. So it's really great to have that insight and an incredible motivator. So highly recommended. Okay, cool. Now we're moving to the practical part. I'm checking on my time. Perfect timing. So we're not going to take too long here. And these are the 3 things that I want us to have one goal of for each. So normally the triad of treatment when we look at diabetes management is diet, exercise, and medication. We've got those 3 that are the big players. They make massive, massive impact. And if your diet is not right, but you're exercising and you're managing with your medication, we ignore the stress, because I'm not a doctor. We're not going to talk about medication today. There's a problem. If you are taking your medication and you're eating well, but you're not exercising, there's a problem. So we really want to make sure that we are doing something and actively engaging in our diet, how we eat, our movement. Are we moving those bodies, and what type of exercise are we doing, and how often are we doing it? Things that are very important. And then taking our medication. But for the purpose of this today, I wanted to have 3, and most of you in the working world, in the corporate world, you probably have some stress, I can imagine. So that's also a huge player in managing blood glucose. So I wanted to chat about that a little bit today. Okay, so excuse me for having great speed, because we have 15 minutes left, and I also want to have those goals and have those questions. So I literally just want to talk about one main thing when we talk about diet. Here I am, a dietitian. I probably should have spoken for 45 minutes on all the different things. But the main thing that I want you to take home today in terms of managing diabetes is that intake of carbohydrates has to change, has to be of paramount importance. So carbohydrates are the complex molecules that, when broken down, become glucose. Simple as that. So they are the things that are giving the pancreas work. Okay, our little buddy sitting in there. I don't actually know if it's on the right or on the left, but our little pancreas is in there. He's overworked. He's underpaid. How are we going to help him? We are going to try and give him less work. It's really as simple as that. So it is a good idea to look at where the carbohydrates are hiding in your diet. Okay, carbohydrates are not just in starch. They're not just in bread, potatoes, rice. Carbohydrates are in fruit. Carbohydrates are in some veggies. Carbohydrates are in your dairy products, your yogurt, your milk. Carbohydrates are in, obviously, your sweets or your sugars. Carbohydrates are in a lot of places, in a lot of sauces, in a lot of drinks. They are there. So we need to educate ourselves. We need to be aware. We need to read food labels. Where are these carbohydrates? Okay. We don't need to have nothing. Some of you might have tried a sort of a Banting or a keto or some of these things. Fine, but we don't need to have zero carbohydrates. We can have some, but we cannot just simply go wild with them. They are difficult for us to not to digest, to metabolize, and they are giving our pancreas a lot of work. And within that, so looking at the overall amount of carbohydrate to reduce, and I mean, that's very individualized. If you are very sporty, exercising a lot, you might need a little bit more. We don't want to sort of have none. We still want to be healthy. So chat to a dietitian about that if you want to know the exact amount. But normally our Western diets are very high in carbohydrates. So it is a good idea to try and reduce them. And then to look at the quality or the characteristics of the carbs that you are eating, because we've got these two big words, glycemic index and glycemic load, GI and GL. Glycemic index is how quickly that carbohydrate becomes glucose in the blood. So how quickly your pancreas is like, I just got 42 emails and I'm going on lunch break in like 3 minutes. He's panicking. He is absolutely panicking, and it's not good. Okay. Glycemic load is the amount. Glycemic load is eating 6 slices of bread instead of eating 2 slices of bread. Perhaps you're having some healthy carbohydrates. It's not a problem, but you're just giving that pancreas a lot of work to do. So both of these need to be on the lower end. We don't want too much carbohydrate at once. We like to spread it out just to give the pancreas some time. And we don't want it to come too quickly. We don't want to put too much pressure on him. We really want him to stay working for as long as possible. Nothing controls the blood glucose better than the pancreas. So we want to preserve his function. So as diabetes is this progressive condition, we don't want to progress it. We want to slow it down. Okay, I'm going to move on because of time and not talk about the other two things. So the next thing I want to talk about is exercise. Okay, this is the second thing in that triangle. It's so important to exercise. And I often start with this. If I have a patient in front of me, I don't even look at the eating before we've looked at the exercise. Are you moving your body? And when are you moving your body? How often are you moving your body? Or what are you doing to move your body? Okay, your muscles use blood glucose. So when you move, if you go for a swim, if you go for a walk, whatever you do, naturally your blood glucose will decrease. Okay, what it's also doing is it is making your body more sensitive to insulin. It reduces insulin resistance. Exercise is so powerful in the reduction of insulin resistance. It is amazing. We love it. You should do it. And it only lasts about 24 to 48 hours. So it's not like a savings bank. Oh, I did like a 4-hour hike up Table Mountain on Saturday. I'm fine for the week. You are not fine for the week. That insulin resistance is going to build up. So try not to leave a day between exercise sessions. And with this, you don't have to be intense. Consistency is the most beautiful word when it comes to exercise. Consistency beats intensity. If you like intensity, go for it. Have a good time. But consistency is super important with your exercise. And then take up space, lift. So your anaerobic, let me actually not even say that. If I don't have the graph in front of me, I am going to get these words mixed up. So the activities that we do that are sort of low and slow, a swim, a walk, even a jog, are going to naturally lower that blood glucose. Lifting weights, is going to probably give you a little bit of an adrenaline response. We might peak and then we'll go down. But what's also going to happen is your body's going to be able to metabolize that glucose so much better. And your basal metabolic rate is going to go up. Your muscles are going to grow. Your bone density is going to grow. Your heart health is going to improve. So this is my encouragement to you to take up space. It's not just about the cardio. It's not just about the immediate let's do something so that the blood glucose will go down now. Not at all. We're looking in the long term. We're looking for long-term health, and we've got a lot of aspects to health that we think about in terms of our body. And a big one, actually, even with exercise, is your mental health and maintaining your motivation. So if you're struggling to follow a meal plan, you're struggling to resist chocolate, go and exercise. Do 10 squats, and then look at that chocolate, and you'll probably be like, okay, it's fine. I've got enough dopamine from my squats. You can move aside chocolate. It helps. And then just a little thing to say, safety first. It's really important to listen to your body. Don't push into pain. If your heart rate's going up too high, stop. We don't want to be silly about this. Slowly, progressively getting fitter, moving the body is super important. Okay, and then lastly, let me check the time again. Almost there. Okay, I'm watching it. So, stress management. What happens in the body with stress, okay, is that there'll be a physical or an emotional trigger. We all know what stress is. Okay, physically, you might feel a bit of pain, surgery. Sometimes exercise actually is even a stress. For some of us, I wouldn't say us. I love exercise, but it's an emotional trigger. But any trigger that makes us stress, will bring us a vasovagal response. So we've got fight or flight. We've heard of that: fight, flight, freeze. And that response lets stress hormones be released in the body, which is cortisol and adrenaline. Those stress hormones go to the liver, and the liver says, okay, it's fine, you're in stress, let me help you. And remember, in our diagram, the liver stores glycogen. The liver can break that apart and give you some glucose, because we need glucose. We need to run away from that lion. We need to scale the wall. We need to get out of the stressful situation. So it's a beautiful system created by the body to help us navigate stress. But if this is long term, if we stay in the stressful place and don't come down, that's when there's a problem, because that blood glucose shoots up and stays up. And remember, when the blood glucose is high for a long period of time, we get damage to the eyes, damage to the kidneys, damage to the small blood vessels, the nervous system, damage to the big blood vessels, your heart. It's not ideal. So these are the three things that I wanted to bring up to the front. Okay, we'll go back there, because this is a beautiful quote as well, from The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. One of our greatest freedoms is how we react to things. And so this is a metaphor we often use with diabetes type 2, that it's a train, it's a progressive condition. And at the end, that train is going to hit your lifestyle conditions. It's going to hit a heart attack. It's going to hit kidney failure. It's going to hit those things that happen if the blood glucose is high for a long period of time. And this bit of a difficult situation with diabetes is that the greatest thing is that we can do something about it. But that's also so hard, because we have to do something about it. And it takes a lot of effort. You can't just pop a pill and think everything's going to be okay, because it's not. So there are things that we can do to slow down the train, or to add more tracks, so that we actually never have to get to that end. So I want you to really be super encouraged today that there is something you can do. And this is what we're going to do, whether we want to open it for discussion. I know, Adrian, you wanted some questions, but if you could, as a take home, one goal for what can change in your diet, one goal for what can change in your exercise, one goal for what can change with your stress management, then I'll be happy. Done.
Super, Louise. Thank you so much. So many nuggets of gold, which has been epic. And the energy that you throw into it as well, and the passion for helping us to think a little bit better about this. And I can only assume your patience as well is awesome. A couple of questions. You guys can post some of them in the chats as we go. I'm just going to start with a couple. So, ending with that train, what it just makes me think of is the progression, and you speak about that. And quite often, if we've been diagnosed with diabetes, we've got to that point. But the starting point of progression, and perhaps for a large majority of people in the audience that aren't diabetic, might be pre-diabetic, might just be here for interest, what should we be doing and perhaps monitoring or testing for to stay on top of this and catch it before it becomes, that train wreck that you speak of?
I love that question. So important, because these things are not just for people living with diabetes, or people who potentially have diabetes in their family, or people who are worried about that. It's for everyone. We should all be managing our stress. We should all be exercising. We should all be eating well, especially if we have children, if we have youngsters that are watching us. And so what I would say is, first of all, if you don't have diabetes and you're looking at this, make the changes, do the things. It's good. Yeah, first. And then secondly, I think if there is diabetes in the family, I think the two things that we look at that put you at risk for type 2 diabetes is, first of all, a family family line of it. So if you've got a predisposition, if it's in your family, it's quite a strong genetic thing. So if you've got it in your family, be aware. And number two is your waist circumference. If you've got a bit of a belly on you, you're also at risk. So those two things together are quite a potent combination. So I would just maybe once a year when you go for your annual checkup at the GP, just check your blood sugar, check how it's going. Or if you are more worried, they might do a more in-depth test like an HbA1c or an oral glucose tolerance test. Rather get yourself screened, know what's going on, especially if you're in that risk category.
May asked here in the chat if there are any symptoms to look out for with high insulin. You mentioned sort of symptoms around your glucose levels fluctuating, but would you feel any different based on your insulin levels?
Well, not particularly, and not sort of in at that moment, but what we do see is insulin is an anabolic hormone. It packs weight, and it packs weight on your belly. So you might think, if you've got a belly and you're really struggling to lose weight, you might think, okay, my insulin's probably a bit high, because it goes with insulin resistance. So anything that you think about like that might be a symptom or a sign of insulin resistance, insulin resistant people have higher insulin levels. The other thing to look out for is, because it's an anabolic hormone, it makes us hungry. So you might feel like you rage, your appetite just rages, especially after you have carbohydrate. If your appetite is then going up, like because your insulin's gone up, you're getting hungry. That might also be a sign of insulin resistance and therefore higher insulin levels.
Jan wanted to know if there's sort of any timing considerations around insulin and metformin, specifically with meals. Would one normally take them before, during, or after?
So metformin, that's sort of a medication that should probably be in your system. So in terms of the effect on the blood glucose, that should be stable as it's in the system. They do say to have it, I think, before a meal so it doesn't upset the gut, unless you're on a slow release, but it's more about the gut and your comfort than about the blood sugar. With insulin, absolutely. This is such a good question. You've got the sort of long-acting insulin if you're on injections and not on a pump, but then you have the short-acting insulin that you take before a meal. And we like to have that 10 to 15 minutes before so that it's working by the time the food enters. So it's so difficult actually to inject and then wait 10 minutes before you eat, but it is quite important and it does help to stabilize those blood sugars.
So to avoid it all, the best thing is to not get diabetes, hey?
Sure.
And take all of these preventive measures.
Yeah.
Tracy wants to know if one should take vitamin B if they are on metformin.
Sure. I do not know the greatest answer to that question. We can look it up and look back.
Sure. Then any alternatives to bread? You obviously mentioned reducing carbohydrates. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean avoiding them entirely. Yeah. So perhaps it's as much of just a decision about being smart with your carbs.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you used to have like a double sandwich, maybe go down to one. Or if you used to have a sandwich, maybe have an open sandwich. Or if you can have a salad at lunchtime and have your sort of your carby meal in the evening because you've got a family with children and you don't want to eat separately, like we navigate it that way. So you absolutely can have carbohydrate. We want high quality carbohydrate with good fiber. But yeah, you don't have to take it out completely. So it's little changes that you can make, whatever works for you.
Super. And then Yusra was asking a question here about GLP medications. Obviously, GLP-1s were initially brought out focusing on sort of diabetes management, which is how we found out that they impact weight loss. Do you have any sort of work, idea, opinion on the medications and maybe their potential or what you've seen in your patients?
Yeah, I think with all of these things, you've got the schools of thought that natural is amazing and we want to do that for the body. And obviously all medication has side effects. There will be some like detriment or detrimental effects on the body that come with it. But if you are really struggling to lose weight, and because you're struggling to lose weight, you're struggling to control the blood sugar, you're feeling depressed, and you take Ozempic or something, and it's really helpful, and it really creates a massive health, like a good change in your body in terms of your health. I think that's great. So I think it's to sort of look at the individual situation. If you can do it without those sort of interventions, go for it. Or that's better. But if you need it, it's there to help for those who are really struggling. So I think also on an individual basis.
Brilliant. That's obviously, the way to approach most of these things, and blood glucose management as well, is take the lifestyle interventions as the first step to them. But there's space for all of these types of things.
Yes.
They can be effective,
Yes.
but there's no one size fits all answer. And specifically when it
Absolutely.
comes to sort of medication and controlling those sorts of things. And if you need help from a specialist, from a practitioner, reach out. That's what the support is there for. Right. Louise, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all of the wisdom that you have shared with us, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today on another webinar. We have one more scheduled in a couple of weeks to wrap up the year, so look out for that. We will post the recording of the session in the app and on our YouTube channel. If anyone wants to catch up on it again, you can. And I'm also just going to pop a link into the chat for a little bit of feedback. Let us know how you felt the session went, and then if there are any topics that you want us to cover or anything else that you feel might be relevant over the next few weeks and months as we host these. Thanks to everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Louise, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.